each other, separate us.
Tuesday, May 27th.
I got one.
Discussion session earlier
Sorry.
we met in room D for executive session where we received legal advice from our municipal solicitor. And it's there. And then Keith, to you. Doing most of it.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
so
Vice
good.
President. Tonight's agenda, we have the introduction, public hearing, and consideration of an ordinance authorizing general obligation bonds and principal amount not to exceed $7,500,000 through the issuance of its general obligation bond series 2025. This is the bond issue that we first introduced as part of the 2025 budget discussion. We've had 2 or 3 meetings in discussion session to sort of clarify the projects that would be involved in that bond issue. And tonight is the public hearing and vote on that issuance. We also have the consideration of a resolution expressing support for Pittsburgh Regional Transit and urging adequate and sustainable funding to maintain transit service for our community. We've all heard about those, issues in the news over the last several months. We've heard about, we're going to have the consideration for the award for Mount Lebanon's 2025-2026 insurance program. Our finance director will give a brief update and discussion session on the most recent costs that we'll see. We'll have the consideration to purchase 1 animal control replacement box. Consideration for the award of quarters 1 and 2 pickleball conversion. There's 2 pieces to that award. One is for the site work, the other is for the court work. We'll have the consideration for the award of the Mount Lebanon Tennis Center Court Center Lighting Project. Also the consideration for the award of the Mount Lebanon 2025 HVAC and boiler replacement contracts. HVAC for this building, boiler replacement and control for the Public Safety Center. We'll have the consideration for the award of the Mount Lebanon Public Safety Center 2025 facade repairs. Also the consideration for the award of the South Garage 2025 repairs. And then the consideration for an appointment to the Mobility and Transportation Board to fill in on an expired term. That is all we have tonight, Mr. President. Mr. Vice President, excuse me.
All right, I'd like to welcome up John Trant with Strategic Solutions to discuss SMART goals and working with us to develop some goals and planning for the staff.
Just a 30-second background for Commission and anybody else that may be interested. Every year I meet with senior staff and provide a performance review for the prior year. And we also review goals for the coming year. Part of the performance review encompasses the goals that were established for the prior year. So that is something that I've done ever since I transitioned into my role as manager in 2016. Several years ago, Commissioner Grella had requested that we look towards having staff develop some SMART goals. And we've gone through that exercise in the past on several occasions. This year, as part of my review, it was requested that we have senior staff develop one aspirational goal that was measurable. So that was done. I sent those out to the Commission, I believe early January, January 6th, I believe. Commissioner Grella responded indicating that he felt that some of those goals didn't quite meet what he was envisioning in terms of goals for that senior staff, and suggested that we may want to bring in a consultant to help us sort of develop a template and to work with staff to develop those goals. I had replied that given staff workload and the fact that we already had a significant amount of goals established for staff, I thought that that would be better done later in the year, or at least that those goals be 2026 goals. I would still request that if the Commission decides to move forward, that these goals be 2026 SMART goals for staff. Again, just due to the large number of projects and current workload for staff. But we have worked with John Trant in the past. He's facilitated several Commission retreats for us. You saw John recently to give you an overview about zoning ordinances and subdivision and land development ordinances. John's a Mount Lebanon resident and I think does an excellent job for us in sort of all of the issues and efforts that we're interested in moving forward. So I asked John to come back in. John did submit a proposal to work with staff on SMART goals, and I'll let John run through that with you.
Thanks, Keith. I think everybody has a copy of the proposals and what I thought I'd do is just walk through the steps and give a brief overview. I kept it simple in response to Keith's request. A 7-step process, starting out with a meeting with Keith to understand specifically, in addition to what he already provided in the introduction, to specifically what he's looking for and what the commission is looking for, with the goal, and you'll see in the item number 1 there and repeated, to create a template. Really, my understanding is it's not only to develop something that can be used this year for next year goals, but on an ongoing basis to provide a template specific to Mount Lebanon and Mount Lebanon departments. So I work with Keith then to develop that template, use that template in meetings with all the department heads and office clerks to review the template, review information around each department's priorities, what's on their plate currently and what they have on their horizon for next year, and then meet with each of the department heads to review and develop those goals, draft those goals into a memo for the manager to review and give feedback, and then provide one final meeting with the manager to finalize the memo and deliver a memo that would include all those goals for each department and the template to be used for future year goal setting.
Since this is a pet project of President Grella's, I would suggest you loop him in at some point in here to see what's going on. Because I think he really has a very set idea as to what he wants.
He does, and unfortunately, since he's wasn't
Here, yeah.
able to be here
Yeah.
tonight due to a last-minute illness, I felt that, combination of him sort of being able to watch the discussion session online and then develop some additional questions.
Good, yeah. I just think he's,
I can loop John back in terms of.
he points oftentimes to the San Diego, am I right? San
Diego
Diego website, which has SMART goals, which he uses as an example, just as a heads up.
And more for commission, when we did a retreat, as I recall, John was the facilitator. And I don't remember if Andrew was on commission at that.
The most recent one he was, yeah.
Okay, all right. So my point is he's had some exposure to commission priorities, issues,
yeah,
questions
sure,
before,
sure.
and he's also the director over at MRTSA for
2 years.
2 years.
I think what's interesting to me, yeah, and I've been thinking about this quite a bit in some different contexts, is, as a small municipality, right? There's only so much capacity, and our primary responsibility is operational execution, which I think I would argue our staff is absolutely phenomenal at.
Right.
Top to bottom. But I think from a commission perspective, what we're trying to wrap our brains around in various paths is how do we understand kind of future of the municipality and adapting over time, recognizing that is largely going to sit at the staff level because they're the ones who are going to ideate and implement. And they're the experts on the ground. So how do we understand that very small sliver of capacity that we have in senior management to be thinking forward, and how do we engage in that process? And it's a tough one. I don't know that there's a right answer, but again, Commissioner Grella is very interested in pursuing it in this mechanism, and I'm not opposed to that. I'm just trying to wrap my brain around how does this all come together as a mechanism to help the community understand the evolution of municipal services over time.
I really like the way you framed that, because one thing we clearly stated over and over again were these were not goals by which staff would be judged necessarily, because if they're future thinking and that this is not, it should be a measurable goal, but not one that you're holding feet to the fire to do. Because oftentimes if it's not done, it's because we haven't got the resources to do it, for example.
Scale, we are
Yeah.
not the size of San Diego, so.
No. I don't know how San Diego rates theirs, but that was,
Right.
and you just said that, I think, kind of.
In my roundabout way.
Yeah.
John, you had talked about, I think rightfully so, developing a template.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And sort of, I liked, again, we did this during the pandemic, brought in a different consultant, but we did it virtually, right? We were all on a Teams call, which presents its own set of challenges. And I will say that everybody is going to, because I see it every year in the goal setting, that everybody's going to approach this a little bit differently,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
Because everybody knows what they do, they know how they do it. They know conceptually some other things that they'd like to be able to do. But certain departments that are more, I'll say, structured in the sense that police and fire sort of live in this world, right? They have very specific goals, they're very measurable, they understand the resources that they need, and they're time specific in a lot of respects. So a little bit easier, I think, for those two departments, as opposed to not picking on him when he's not here, and tomorrow's his birthday, so I'll be nice. But our commercial districts manager, right? He operates in a completely different world.
Right,
So it's a little bit more of a challenge
sure.
for him to sort of grasp and understand John's proposal. And John, I don't want to interrupt or steal from you.
Keith, you can say, you can put words in my mouth, you can say whatever you would like me to say.
But John is proposing to have sort of a one-on-one meeting with each department head and staff office chief. So that there's again, he will be able to understand what they're trying to convey. They can understand what he's trying to convey. And I think it'll just be a more effective process.
And these meetings, these are meant to be just you and the staff with or without Keith.
My expectation would just be me and the staff unless I was directed otherwise.
I don't need to be in every.
All right, I was just trying to get a sense.
Not only don't I need to be, I really don't have the time to be.
Yeah.
And I also have a very talented senior staff that they will.
Yes, you do. Great. Cool. I'm okay with this.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am still going to ask Craig to watch discussion session.
I think so.
I want to get his direct comments back
Right.
on John's
Hi,
proposal.
Craig.
To see if there's anything that we're missing. I
Yeah.
don't know if he's online or
He's
not.
not, but I just
No,
want to say
but
hi
when he
when
goes
he
to
watches
watch,
the
you
recording.
can always.
24, does he remember the number, 24?
Oh, there you go.
See if he watches it.
And I guess I'm gonna give a qualified thumbs up because I really until Craig comments
Yeah,
on this,
yeah,
I
I
feel
think
like we
Craig
really
should-
can't
You really
finalize our
have
yays.
his input. This has been a pet project of his for a while, so.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, next up, we'd like to discuss consent order, so welcome up, Gateway Engineers.
Yeah, I don't know who's going first, Dan.
Yeah,
Preference on.
I'll go first.
Because I know you're doing
If
one.
I'm ready, you can get up off my chair.
Always important.
Good evening, everybody. Ryan, are you ready to use Zoom, Dan? On your Zoom? I'm gonna let Ryan go, I gotta get on, doesn't he?
So from your handouts, you'll want the one that says municipal separate storm sewer MS system MS4 permits.
Yeah, so Ryan Berner in our office, he's a shareholder and he handles our MS4 for most of our clients. Brought him here tonight, he's been running the Mount Lebanon program for several years. There's a requirement once a year to do some sort of a public meeting in terms of where we talk about our MS4 permit and what we're doing with our storm sewer system, so I'll let Ryan take it from there.
All right, thank you, Dan. Good evening, everybody. Looks like we don't have to go through introductions. But yeah, as Dan mentioned, the municipality has an MS4 permit. One of those requirements is routine public meetings to inform the public of what, the MS4 permit is and what the municipality is doing to comply with the regulations. So tonight's meeting does meet the requirements of a portion of the permit serving that purpose. So,
And just for everybody's edification who hasn't heard of this program before or knows part of it, I mean, essentially what an MS4 permit is a federal permit that we have to discharge water into the receiving streams of the Commonwealth and of the waters of the United States. So I tell people it's equivalent to really like you think about a sewage treatment plant that discharges to the river, has a permit to do that. We have a permit the same way with our storm source system to discharge to the river. Simply put.
correct, yeah.
Sorry, Ryan.
No, it's okay.
I just like to bring it down to those terms.
That's all right, I mean, I love the logo, we all live downstream.
Yeah, right. So we'll talk a little bit about MS4 itself. We'll talk about the permit requirements and the newer additions to the permit, which are the pollutant reduction plans, and then we'll finish up with some next steps. So as Dan mentioned, MS4 really started back in 1999 at the federal level, and then municipalities were required to comply with MS4 starting in 2003. The enforcement was handed over to the states. And then the municipalities have to abide by these regulations, so we're going back 20-some years now. Basically, the overall requirements are to have a stormwater management program. That's in a nutshell, that's really what it is. There's about 6 buckets that make up the permit of various things you have to comply with, and each year we have to submit a report to the DEP explaining what the municipality did to meet those six goals of the permit. So those are annual reports that get submitted every year. We'll be doing it again this year in September. And then again, the newer piece of the permit, the pollutant reduction plan, is a new requirement, which we'll touch on here at the end. Going back to Dan's comments, I think this diagram, if everybody can see it, sort of explains visually what Dan mentioned. On the left side, we have sanitary and storm sewers, and down the middle of the road here, a little tough to see on the screen there, it's a blue pipe that's collecting all the storm water from the roofs, the impervious surfaces, things like that on the ground. That gets channeled into the inlets along the streets and then discharges right to the stream down here. So there's no treatment of the water before it gets into the stream for the most part. So that's what MS4 is here for, to sort of protect the streams and make sure it's good water getting into the stream without all the pollution. So the 6 buckets that make up the permit, public education, public involvement. The public education piece tonight is serving a portion of that requirement, as I mentioned. Illicit discharge detection and elimination, that's one of the bigger ones of the permit. Requires a lot of field work and mapping and things like that. There's construction site and post-construction requirements, as well as pollution prevention, good housekeeping, which is more focused on the municipality taking care of the grounds that they own. As far as DEP is concerned, if you're not taking care of your own grounds, they assume you're not doing a very good job of taking care of anything else. Okay, so MCM1, Public Education and Outreach. We'll just talk a little bit about this briefly. This requires a written plan. All these minimum control measures require plans, something written, some documentation to say, here's what the municipality is doing to comply with this requirement. And the measures taken by the municipality is distributing educational material to the public. That goes to various public buildings, libraries, I think I've seen it in the Public Works building and in various areas, just to allow people to see and read when they come in to learn a little bit about what the municipality is doing for stormwater. There's a requirement to maintain a list of target audiences. That's typically businesses, residents, schools, things like that. It provides a little bit of the who for what it is you're doing. And then they require at least 2 methods of distribution. The municipality has several, with the website, various bulletin boards, distribution areas, and the Mount Lebanon magazine. So you guys are certainly covered from that standpoint. For public involvement, this is basically just saying there needs to be a place for the public to voice their concerns or their opinions about stormwater. This involves public meetings such as this, during ordinance adoption, stormwater ordinance adoption meetings, allowing public comment like municipalities do. That's all part of the permit. So it's a fairly easy one to meet. And then just soliciting input from the public. This also involves events and things like that the public can be involved with. It might be a stream cleanup, it might be a road cleanup, things like that are advertised to educate them, to let them know that these things are happening and why, and allow them to participate. So the first two are focused more on the public than anything. As we move into number 3, illicit discharge detection and elimination. As I mentioned, this is the larger one of the permit. It really focuses on the infrastructure itself. So to give a little info on what Mount Lebanon is managing from stormwater assets, you have roughly almost 60 feet of, 60 miles of storm sewer pipe, over 3,000 inlets, almost 2,000 manholes, and a little over 180 outfalls. So there's a lot of assets that are in the ground to handle stormwater in the municipality. Within this MCM, we then conduct outfall screenings, which means we go to each of those outfalls and check the water as it's coming out to make sure there's nothing in there that would cause any kind of pollution going into the stream. If there is, there's measures in place to then investigate where that water might be coming from, using storm sewer mapping and sort of chasing upstream where that water might be coming. Public education on illicit discharges, which we'll talk about here on the next slide, just informing them of what you can and can't put in the storm sewer system, and then having a venue for the public to report on illicit discharges. So when we talk about illicit discharges, these are some of the things we're talking about. Grass clippings going into the storm sewer system, dumping grease into the inlets, paint, construction sites can cause various pollution in the storm water. Various soaps and things like that carry various chemicals can also be on that list as well. So this is sort of what we're talking about.
How about people emptying their pools?
Yeah, there are protocol for the proper way to
Actually, under the
do
health
that, yeah.
department regulations, pools are required to be drained into a sanitary sewer because of the chemicals that are contained.
Okay. She's curious. I don't have my pool yet, but I'm still working on it.
We'll be watching you.
Yeah, I know, right?
So, when it comes to the actual outfall screenings, as I mentioned, we go to the assets. It looks something like this, where the water's actually coming out of the pipe and into the stream, and we conduct sample testing on that water to see what might be in it. We're testing for things like ammonia, pH, chlorine, things like that. And if there's a significant reading on that, then that's when we start to do our investigation. Okay, what we're looking for is what they call dry weather flow. Basically, that means if there's been no precipitation in the past few days and there's water coming out of those pipes, something's getting into it. Whether it's someone draining a
Right,
pool
sure.
or there's something tied into it, or maybe even just a stream that's infiltrating into that, or a spring, I mean. So once that's noticed, then we start doing some investigation to figure out what that might be. So in 2025, we've conducted 44 outfall screenings, so we're a little ahead of the pace in 2025. I'll show you what that looks like. The process of screening these, we use an iPad with a form here on the right side. That's just a portion of it. It's a fairly lengthy form that gets filled out for each outfall screening. This ties directly into the municipality's GIS system, and then these stats are basically calculated in real time as things are completed. So we have our 44 that have been completed so far. On the left side, we're showing different charts of things that talk about dry weather flow, if it was found, or if there's any kind of maintenance thing from a submerged outfall standpoint. Maybe something needs cleaned out a little bit from a sediment standpoint. So we're tracking all that. And then on the right side, we have a couple indicators that we keep an eye on to look at the outfalls that we may have to go back to and screen again and then investigate further. Things like coloration or odor, things like that we want to look at again. So many times it turns out to be nothing, but to comply with a permit, these are things we have to keep track of and then go back and revisit and verify that yes or no, there's not a problem.
So if you get essentially a positive test, there's chlorine, let's say, protocol is to go back to see if you get that a second time?
Correct, yeah. Yeah, and a lot of times what we'll do is we'll start chasing that upstream and looking at the inlets above stream, you'll see water going through, and at some point, that water won't be there, so it means it's getting in between those two inlets.
Right.
And then that's when some of the storm sewer mapping comes into play to figure out what's all draining to that location.
Right.
If it's pools, then it's probably a residential area that may have a lot of pools, you know? So that can then help to dictate some of the education that goes into the program, right? And you can start to do the different things about the municipality based on the different issues and things you're seeing.
Do we do that, by the way, obviously we have a pool permit program here, does someone get something saying, hey, this is the process you have to go through to drain your pool?
It's all part of the permit issuance.
Okay.
Are we required to do a certain number of outfall tests every year, Ryan, or how does that work?
So the requirement is to have them all tested within the 5-year permit window.
Within a 5 year?
Yeah.
Okay.
But then what happens is as we see things are flowing, or there's some of these things like a color type thing come up, that then gets put on the next year's program as well.
Okay.
So you're looking at it twice that year, then you're gonna go back again. They call it almost like a priority outfall that you wanna look at again. So we typically shoot for about 20%, just to keep sort of a baseline year to year. So moving on, looking at more construction side of things for MS4. Basically, the requirement here is just to make sure that the construction sites are, the construction is being performed in ways to keep the sediment and the pollution on site, not getting into the streams. That's why in most cases, you'll see sort of a silt sock barrier around the site or inlet filters nearby to catch anything that might be coming off the site. For the most part, the Allegheny County Conservation District handles this piece for the larger sites, right? So the municipality can rely on them for that type of thing. They do their own check-ins and looking at stuff to make sure things are on the up and up there. So that takes some of the burden of the program off the municipalities.
Any site over 1 acre of disturbance requires a separate federal permit and an BDS permit. So they really ratchet down on any disturbances.
Right.
And if there are violations, the municipality gets notification of violation as well.
Shut the project down.
So what the municipality can do, from a standpoint of MCM4, is provide information about what's required on the site. So whether it's a building permit or something like that, something just to say, you know, these are the requirements of the MS4 permit, all pollution needs to stay on the site, not get into the streams, that kind of thing. So moving into MCM5, this is sort of after construction is done and there's things in place to service the stormwater on these sites. Things like tanks or rain gardens, various things like that handle the stormwater after construction is completed. MCM5 basically just says that the municipality has to have an inventory of these, know where they all are, whether they're public or private, and be able to get information on your own to make sure that they are operating properly and they're being maintained. And then if it's a private one, having a process in place to receive inspections and various things like that to show that the ponds, the BMPs, whatever they are operating as designed and not being ignored.
So as that process works, there are a lot of additions now. The commission's aware that we changed the ordinance to be 400 square feet of impervious area to require stormwater management. So Rodney's office, and I help him when necessary, is reviewing a lot of stormwater that comes in for simple additions and other things. Some of them are much more sophisticated than that, but they all require to sign an O&M agreement so that they know that there's something running with the property and it's there, it has to be maintained.
Talking with Rodney, that all is being maintained in various databases as far as what you guys have and the inspections and things like that to show that it's all being taken care of. MS4 is very much a documentation-heavy program. You can do everything to comply, but if you don't have any documentation for it, DEP is going to assume it didn't happen. So that's why he does things like that. Okay, so moving on to MCM6, the final of the permit here. This is the pollution prevention good housekeeping. As I mentioned, this is protocol for property owned by the municipality. The requirement here is again to have a written plan and an inventory of all your sites. So we have a couple examples of what we're talking about here. Obviously, Public Works is the big one, where we have the fueling stations and something like that. There's protocols in place to say if there's any kind of spill, there's spill kits nearby, here's who to contact to help clean up. Same with the salt storage area. There's protocols in place with the municipality's written plan to say that excess salt will be swept back into the pile and be kept out of the rain, that kind of stuff, so it doesn't get picked up in the runoff and eventually into the stream. So all that is documented.
Yeah, but we put it on our roads.
Right, yeah.
I know, that's what I was
Correct.
gonna say, but.
Correct.
Doesn't make much
It
sense.
doesn't, I agree. don't kill the messenger. I'm just here to tell you about the requirements. So the new requirement is pollutant reduction plan, as I mentioned. This started back in 2018, and this was a requirement that said municipalities have to reduce the amount of sediment being produced in the streams, which is obviously coming from stormwater runoff and things like that. So the requirement is to reduce sediment by 10%, which also gave you credit for 5% of phosphorus. The ways to handle these projects, the most popular way to do it was through stream bank restoration, which the municipality did 2 of those projects to meet this requirement. So there was one done in Thornwood Drive and another one done at Bird Park. We have pictures here that sort of show a before and after. You can see where the stream bank sides are eroded in the picture on the top left and the bottom right. There's logs and various structures in place to slow the water down or keep it off the sides or move it more toward the middle of the channel so it doesn't erode the sides as much. So there's usually natural materials that take care of all those different structures in the streams themselves.
These are very urbanized streams, and that picture on the right, I don't think does it justice as to the after effects of the way that the
yeah.
water is more quietly taken through the area. There's less cut bank erosion and so forth. So it's a very effective process, and it does, it can enhances things. There's probably a lot of vegetation there now. That
Yeah,
picture's
absolutely.
not.
Yeah, this was soon after construction.
Yeah, it was soon after construction.
Right.
And one of these projects was in the Thornwood Drive one, or no, not Thornwood, the Levingston project was done in the Sawmill Run watershed. Spring, that would have been, that's the other, that goes to Scott Township, and then, Thornwood Drive was, and Bird Park were done in the Sawmill, or the Painters Run watershed.
Right. Other things to comply with this, the annual inlet cleaning done by Department of Public Works, that helps out on the PRP side with removing the sediment, and things like tree pits with road reconstruction.
Public Works actually measures the amount of sediment that they remove from those catch basins, because it's, again, to Ryan's point, it's very paperwork heavy. So we keep records of that, so that if we're ever asked for those, we've got those and they become part of our annual report.
What's a tree pit? I mean, explain to me what that means. I mean, I get an idea of what a tree pit is, but why? I mean, I don't understand.
It reduces the amount of impervious. It's actually an opening in the concrete. You see them all over Mount Lebanon where the dirt's exposed and rainwater can go into that
Okay,
area.
all right, now I get it. Okay. Now I understand.
But I like to mention with the Bird Park one in particular, there's always opportunities to sort of get double bang for your buck on a lot of MS4 things. So there was a sign that was put in place near that project that explains what stream restoration is, so people can read it and learn about it, understand why it's there.
Right.
So through that, that's also another form of education to the public that's being provided. So you're getting credit sort of 2 different ways from that project. So last slide here, future tasks and permit changes. Continuing to comply with the MCM requirements of the permit, first and foremost. This September, as I mentioned, we'll be submitting the next annual report that's going to cover the last permit year, which was from July 1st to June 30th of this year. So sort of that fiscal calendar is what we're looking at there. DEP inspections are always on the horizon. I think they happen about every 5 years. Mount Lebanon had one, I believe, 2 years ago. Everything went very well there. And we are waiting on formal approval from DEP for new MS4 permit guidelines. That should be coming out anytime now. I think they said it was going to be out a few months ago. So we're still waiting on that, but we have seen a little bit of what's coming down the pike here. So on the PRP side, they're going to focus more on volume control instead of that sediment loading, that 10% sediment loading. So it's a little bit different way to handle that. They're looking to incentivize collaborations. Looking for municipalities to work with each other for these various projects. So we'll see what that entails when the final permit is provided. And then they're also looking at socioeconomic factors to be considered. I think there was a fairly large uproar from small municipalities that have no budget for any of this stuff and are not able to do a lot of these projects. But it's an unfunded mandate, so there's a lot of uproar about that, so we'll see what happens with that.
Just say I participated in that last DEP inspection.
Yeah.
We got down to Public Works, the inspector that came in, there were literally, I think, at least 2 or 3 large binders full of documents that he went through and just said, okay, tell me where this is, and everything was tabbed, and I was very happy that
Yeah, good.
check off everything.
Well done. Yeah, thank you. Jeff, that's you.
No, Dan has the second piece for consent order.
So we'll continue to, oh,
There we go, that's better.
He's held down there, Andrew.
Okay, continuing the subject of sewers, we're gonna now talk about sanitary sewers. This is really a presentation that Dennis Flynn from our office put together. He's the project manager that really is handling our consent order compliance. So this, as we just talked about, having a permit for our storm sewers, we actually do have many permits, DEP permits, to operate a sanitary sewer system in the community. As the commission is aware, this consent order that we're under, which is really an order from the federal government, which is issued through the DEP and the Allegheny County Health Department, is in order to maintain and operate our sanitary sewer system. The difference between all of the municipalities, 83 of them that flow to Alcosan, and the city of Pittsburgh and some few other communities, is that our systems are separate. We have separate storm sewers, separate sanitary sewers. In the city and some other surrounding communities, they have combined sewers. The difference is you can get a permit for a combined sewer and you're allowed to have an overflow, and you manage to that to certain conditions and parts of your permit. When you own a separate sanitary sewer, an overflow is basically illegal and it has to be eliminated. So we've been under the process this has been an evolution to get to the point where we are now. And we're actually working on some tangible results that we hope to achieve, and that's what I'm going to go through here tonight. So just the outline here, I'll give a little bit more on the background, give you an update on the progress, and then we'll talk at the end about some of the impact and benefits, and then the next steps in the process as we see them coming. So on the background side of things, as the origin of this has been, as I just said, to deal with sanitary sewer overflows. The initial phases were a point where nobody really cared about their sanitary sewers. There was no inventories on them. There were a lot of problems. There were root problems. We didn't have good maps. Nobody knew where manholes were, a ton of different things. So we went through a whole process of really the first part of the consent order was mapping your system and understanding your system. And then they put us on a steady diet of O&M. So we have 150 miles of sanitary sewer in the community. So every year we go through about 10% of that system. We televise it, we make sure that it's operating properly, and that's a rotational process that will never end.
For anybody who doesn't know, what is O&M?
O&M is operation and maintenance. So that's really where we work with.
We get into initials and some
Yeah,
folks
no
like.
problem. Thank you. I appreciate that. So what we do is we work with Public Works to initiate contracts. Either they're doing work or we're contracting for work to monitor the system. And then as we have moved past that initial phase, there was a phase 1 consent order, which was basically to do a study and determine what it would take to eliminate our overflows or convey that water. And if everybody might recall that the cost of that was exorbitant, both from Alcosan's standpoint and for the neighboring communities. the regulators took a back step. The county went to bat, Three Rivers Wet Weather. We went back, negotiated something different with the regulators, which pushed us into a phase 2 consent order, which was where we are right now. So the phase 2 consent order is really, I would say it's an incremental effort to eliminate the water from the system. And that's, we're moving on pretty large projects right now to emphasize that. I'm going to give you some statistics on where we think we are on that. So the key components of the phase 2 consent orders was establishing a baseline. And the baseline is really what the regulators felt was what could be expected that we could take in terms of flow into the system, at least at this initial stage. Then there were flow studies completed. There was modeling that was undertaken to decide what condition we were in terms of how much flow was coming from the system and where we were meeting that baseline standard. And then second of all, there were actually 2 places where the community flowed in to a SSO, which is a separate sanitary sewer overflow, which again, as I explained earlier, is illegal. There were 2 of those. They weren't in our community. One was in Scott Township and one was in Castle Shannon. So we had to come up with a study on that, and that study was submitted. And then we came up in September of '24, there was a design project that was submitted where we outlined how we were going to address the situation in the system to meet the standard. And then we're proceeding through construction toward the end of this year. Next year, we'll look at the assessment, finishing all the flow monitoring, issue a final report to the regulators, and see how well we complied with that phase 2 consent order. Now, as we understand it, there's this first phase of the consent order is not going to be punitive if we don't meet the requirements. It's really kind of a judgment phase of where we are, what methods and things that we're doing to try to eliminate some of this water in the system. And actually, Al-Qasim has been instrumental in issuing grants called GROW grants, some of you have heard about, which we've capitalized on to spend part of the money on our system, where they're using these projects as sort of they're the catalyst, or they will be the catalyst of future work and experimental phase of a project. And then we'll issue the final report in 26, and then we'll see where the regulators go. So getting back to the gold line standard, this is what they establishing this baseline. What this looks at in front of it is all the watersheds in the community. There are actually 17 different watersheds in the community. When you live in a place called Mount Lebanon, that means we're at the top of the hill. It means we flow into various other places. So that means 17 different watersheds. A watershed is basically an area where everything flows to one point. So within 8 of those, the good news is we already meet the standard. That would be where you see on this chart, just see the blue color. That's where we meet the standard. There are a certain number that we were within 10% of the standard, and that would be the purple areas. And then there are actually 7 that we don't meet the criteria. We're at least 15% over the gold line standard. So there are a total of 7 of those where we need corrective action, and that's currently where we're doing the work. This is just a different representation of that. And when looking at a community map, this isn't necessarily a geographic map of the borders of Mount Lebanon, because watersheds don't follow borders, right? We cross into different communities. We do see border lines, but essentially our 2 major watersheds are Painters Run, Sawmill Run, and then we do have minor areas that go to a couple other different watersheds. One in Scott Township, Hope Hollow watershed, and we do have another one that goes into another 2 in Scott Township. So we're sort of going between different communities. One goes to Castle Shannon, some go in Upper St. Clair. So again, being at the top of the mountain, We're doing a lot of work with our neighbors, and we've gone through that cooperative process.
So what you're saying is that the bubble doesn't extend to water.
Correct.
Got it.
We'll have to get that fixed. So this colorful map shows the flow studies that were completed to determine the analysis of how we are going to comply with the order. So if you can appreciate, there's, when you look at excess water in the sewer system, there's a lot of statistics out there that will tell you that you'll find 80% of the flow and like 30% of the area will come from, like it's very small. So you have to kind of break this down. And if you recall, we did some very intricate flow monitoring studies, both through Alcacian's help, through some different innovative methods that we used, but we came up with really where we stood on how we wanted to attack this program. The second part of that, again, the analysis was we had to work with our neighbors on the Hope Hollow watershed, as we talked about. There's a sanitary sewer overflow. If any of you, I live in this area and have always, from time to, not always, I don't see it as much anymore. I used to see it all the time. I think we're doing some good work. But I used to see the Scott Township municipal vehicle with its wheel pulled over the top of the manhole to keep it from rising up like a geyser. You'll see it down in the center of Concord Red. That doesn't happen that much anymore. Phil's giving me a look. He doesn't want to hear about that. So in order to take care of that, we worked in conjunction with Scott Township and their engineer. There's contemplated as an underground storage tank, approximately 78,000 gallon tank, which is pretty big, that would be underground, that would sort of act as a holding tank to allow the peak of any storm event that we get to hold it and then gradually release it so we don't have a discharge into the receiving stream. So that's what a flow equalization tank looks like. So that's just in the study phase. That's not something that we have to do right now, but they wanted a plan for that. In the Castle Shannon watershed, Rockwood Avenue, we actually did enough flow monitoring on that. We all agreed we could close that off. There's been enough work done that's not required. We aren't going to back people up if we close this off. So that was the report on this one. And I can't recall if we did this already, but I really think it was Castle Shannon's to do. So I'll have to talk to them and see if they did it. All right, that's where we were on the study side. So what does the project scope look like and what the commission has authorized both last year and this year? If you recall, my recommendation was get ahead of the curve, get good prices in on all the work that we need to do, because there's going to be all these communities trying to do all this work at one time. So the good part of it is we did a big chunk of it last year, and then we're already well into the second part of it this year. But that included approximately 100,000 feet, approximately between 15 and 20 miles of lining of our sanitary sewers. I'll show you a slide on that lining in a little bit, but essentially we're building a new pipe within an old pipe. And when we do that, we're going to make it watertight. So that's the key.
What's the lifespan for that?
I would say it's going to give us another 50 years out of our system. And then there'll be something else after that. I don't know what it'll be.
Exactly.
And then we're also rehabilitating manholes with signs of infiltration. A lot of our manholes were constructed with brick. Modern construction is precast concrete manholes that don't infiltrate as much. So we're going in and actually spraying concrete on the inside of our manholes, putting gaskets on them, doing all sorts of things to make them as watertight as possible. So within the requirement of the consent order, this is a big number, we're required to remove about 360 million gallons of water per year from an overflow situation. Based upon what we've analyzed, and again, this isn't an exact science, it's a lot of things working together. Our estimate is we're going to be at a 450 million mark to be there. We've wanted to be a little bit conservative.
That's why I wasn't sure how the numbers, this is exceeding it dramatically in a good way.
Yes, that's our anticipation, but we may not, as I said before, a lot of this there's only so much we can do within the public side of the system.
Right.
We're not on the private side. There is still going to be water coming from the private side. we're trying to minimize that and just, see where the impact we are.
Can you put those numbers into context in terms of like, how much does our system, how many millions of gallons,
Does it handle?
does it handle? Like, do you have some way for us to have context of what these numbers?
Sure.
How big?
Yeah.
What size lake?
Well, are we?
All right, I love to do this kind of math. This is
Yeah,
what
I'm
I'm
just
proud
looking for.
of. So 30,000 people,
Yeah.
100 gallons per person per day.
Oh.
That's 300,000 gallons, right?
Per day.
Per day of normal domestic sewage. Now, that doesn't account for commercial and everything else. I'm just thinking of from a population standpoint. Let's just say our flow was 500,000 gallons a day. I'm just gonna rough it, because I don't have total estimates on what dry weather flow is. So if there's 360 days in a year, our normal domestic sewage should only be about, 180 million gallons, right? 500,000 a day times 360
Okay.
would be 180 million gallons. So 180 million gallons, you can see that we're removing twice of, look how much extraneous water we're trying to get out of
Yeah.
the system. We do have a lot of water in the
Extra
system
water.
beyond dry weather flow. Because if you were operating a normal sanitary sewer, that's why they're only 8 inches in diameter. They're not anticipated to take that
Carry the
much
flow.
flow.
That's right, yeah.
And that's why they overflow.
Wow. And is the anticipated removal by the end of this year or is?
I mean, all the projects that we just completed, so Dennis summarized all the projects that we've been working on that are included in this. All the O&M repairs that we've done, 22 through 24, 25 also. And then we have these big projects, which are phase 1 and phase 2 projects. We've been annually lining, out of that 15 miles of sewer ice that we look at, we're probably been lining anywhere from 3 to 5 miles per year just under the maintenance program, because it makes sense to line sewers manhole to manhole while you're doing it. We haven't been doing spot liner here, spot liner here. Do the whole thing, have a new sewer. It's cheaper, it's faster, I think it's much, much better. So we've been doing that and trying to get ahead of the game so that we're not out there making a lot of digs in people's yards, because that's the challenge. You don't want to dig in
Right.
people's yards. It's very expensive. It requires a lot of time, a lot of hand holding with people. A lot of things don't get put back the way they're supposed to be put
I
back.
hate it.
It's nowhere where you want to be. So we're past that phase. We have very few dig repairs that we have to do now. We're into the really tough ones that are left. All right, so in the construction phase of things, like Dennis says, these are the contracts that we're onto. So in 2025, we're already 67% complete with the O&M repairs. All of the phase, Grow Cycle 7 and 8 project, phase 1 of our work is complete. That was the big contract with In Situ form last week. Commission's already authorized post monitoring under that, so we're already analyzing the results of that first work that took place. Now we're into the second phase, which includes the Begg Snyder project, which is underway right now under construction. And then we're also have the phase 2 consent order contract, the other big multi-million-dollar contract for lining that's well on its way also. So we anticipate substantial completion by November, and then we'll finish those contracts and then pursue it into the analysis side of things. So this is just a dashboard from GIS that we use to analyze of the lining repairs that are anticipated this year. 63 of them are complete, and I don't know when this snapshot was taken. I'm sure there's a lot more than that right now. But it's just a dashboard that we use and continue to monitor the contracts.
When it says, I look at yellow punch list, what would be an example that, is it when the lining goes in and then sometimes we have to go back and punch out the opening for each house? I'm just curious when you see.
Yeah, we
that.
do that right away. I mean, punch list would probably be on if we're doing any dig repairs or we're going back in. You really don't have much in the way of punch list on lining projects. If you don't cut out the laterals right away, we've had one or two out of the many, many miles that we've done. There's some that have slipped by that haven't been done, and you know about this pretty quickly.
No, I mean, the number is 2.8%, I just
But
going
it's
like,
in the basement.
just reconciling with the lines and trying to.
I think to Dan's point, for the big projects, there would be a restoration.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I asked Dennis to give me a good graphic, and I'll tell you what, he really came up with a good one here. I anticipated a bar graph, but he made it into a manhole. So this is our required removal. Like I said, it was 361. Our anticipated is up over the top of this manhole. To date, we think we've gotten about 164 million gallons per year. The actual removal, we need to measure and monitor. We don't really, this is our guesstimate of where we are at this time. Like I said, we're doing monitors that's being installed. And once we do that, we'll get a better idea how we are in terms of meeting the goal. Just in terms of community impacts, I think this is important to recognize when you are spending all of this money. We're eliminating, obviously, sewage from our local waterways, reduces health risks, water quality improvements. And then part of the real world results, I mean, I personally experienced issues on Shadow Lawn over 20 years of trying to fix that repair down there. We finally got that repair completed through the commission's commitment to that project, to taking a really bad area and fixing it, which eliminated a significant SSO. We also identified Scott Township having issues as a part of that project, and they've done some work downstream. So that all leads to where I was talking about the manhole, the truck they put on the manhole lid. So that's all in that watershed. So we've seen significant reductions based upon flow monitoring in that watershed. And then we've gotten some repairs to the sewers that are actually right along the stream, along Painter's Run and Hope Hollow. We've done some repairs related to that. We talked about the lining. This is just a graphic on the lining where you see the old clay pipe. We lined the new pipe with a polymer liner that sticks to the inside of the pipe and is watertight. And basically, we're building an old pipe inside of a new pipe inside of an old pipe. We reduce the risk of backups. We don't have the frequency. When I first started as the engineer in Mount Lebanon, we had a huge list of root repairs that we did every year. When you do these type of repairs, it eliminates roots also because clay pipes have joints every 3 feet, and the roots are constantly trying to get into the pipe. In actuality, I think this is a great stat. 40% of our system is already will be rehabilitated by the end of this year. So we've gotten 40% of the 150 miles has been totally redone. So I think that's a significant achievement. And I know we're way ahead of anybody else, but DEP, the county, everybody looks to Mount Lebanon and points to us as being the leader in this. And we're obviously spending the money, but we're getting money where there is grant money out there. This just points to the dollar amount on projects awarded, about $11.2 million. To date, we spent about 5.3. There's some outstanding costs related to that. The total potential on the grant award is 2.5 million. The approved reimbursements from the county are about 516. We expect another 663 to come in shortly, and the 128 is outstanding. That's already been requested also. So there's still some left to be taken out of here, or to get back to this 2.5 million level. That's ultimately coming from the projects that are out there right now. When we prove and make the flow monitoring reports back to Alcosan, who awarded these grants, we feel that we're going to be pretty close to the 2.5 million that they've allocated to it. We also were able to obtain a $500,000 small sewer water grant, which is going on right now. And we'll do that project between that and the GROW grant awarded. That won't be any municipal cost out of that particular project. So that's a good thing to happen.
Something back real quick, that
Sure.
outstanding reimbursement request, 128,000, that's from the county? That's where those.
That's all from Alcosan.
Okay, it's all from Alcosan.
Yes. And then just as we talked about, we've made consecutive, considerable progress in the matter. We've helped eliminate some of the SSOs, reduce the overflows, and we've repaired our infrastructure in a significant way. We've got community benefits. We've leveraged what we've done to our system with the available grants out there to maximize the return on the investment. What's next? Again, as we talked about, we're going to finalize this what we're doing through these current projects. We're going to assess where we are, and then there's already starting to be discussions regarding where things are going in the next order and where that will be, and we'll continue to collaborate with Alcosan and Three Rivers Wet Weather and any of our other stakeholders in this matter. So, I've seen the evolution of this from the first day that these letters were issued, that we had to start to do this. And I mean, to me, it's been a lot of time and a lot of effort, and it is showing real tangible results at this point. Any questions?
Excellent, thank you.
Looks good, thank you.
I can remember when we were gonna put big tanks on the river. Hold it. I can, around the riverfront.
Mr. Vice President, it's back to you for the next
All right,
discussion.
just wait to see if there's any questions. Ian, joining us to discuss advisory boards.
Look at that, we're on time too.
Well, of course. Craig's not running things, we're fine.
This is being recorded,
Thank you, Commissioners. So we have now passed the 1-year mark from when the new advisory boards took effect in April of last year. Part of the task that the Commission did when they passed the advisory board policies and procedures document was a requirement for boards to submit an annual report to the municipal planner every year. So I'm happy to report that all 5 advisory boards did do that. And I'll have some more details on some of the nitty-gritty stuff when I give my annual update on the progress towards the comprehensive plan, because that was really the idea of those annual reports, was to help me track what progress we've made towards achieving those comp plan goals. But in those reports, which are all in your packets, there were some requests for direction from the commission. So this is mostly a discussion session topic for the commission to answer some of those questions and provide feedback to the advisory boards, basically telling the board liaisons to those respective boards, hey, here's the direction we want the boards to go in. So I think the most significant questions came from the financial management board. So in the interest of time, probably starting there is the best idea. To other boards that had questions for the commission, there's things that the commission is still getting either legal advice on from the solicitor in exec session, or the mobility board topic, Commissioner Flynn and I are working on some stuff. We'll have a future discussion session topic on that one. So I think the financial management board questions are really the ones the group should try and tackle tonight. And that was mostly around the request the commission had made, which came out of one of the goals of the comp plan, for the financial management board to take a look at the cost of our solid waste and recycling collection contract. And, as we get towards the end of this 5-year contract, which won't be coming for a few more years, what are our options? What would the cost be if we explored bringing it in-house versus other options? The board was just looking for some direction. So I put the questions in my memo, and I'll let you all discuss and turn it over to the
Ian,
board's liaison.
thank you, if the commission agrees, for focusing on financial management, because we are a bit lost. And I'm going to ask Andrew if you can come up here, just, so we're looking for some guidance. And jump in if you wish. I think the group is kind of like, we're trying to eat an elephant and trying to figure out, are we eating the elephant? Should we eat the elephant? How do we, and I'm gonna point to Commissioner Flynn to try and give us some direction, because we're all kind of going, and?
Yeah.
So,
Well,
help.
the answer to number 1 is yes.
Well, so this is an interesting one, and I literally just spent 4 hours down
Talking
at
about it, yeah.
Connect, talking about this
Regional,
specifically.
yeah.
Ultimately, I think this is a regional solution, but I think the question is how does Mount Lebanon understand, the costs of waste?
Right.
And how do we think about, what our priorities are, right? Are these costs appropriate? Are the costs that we anticipate increasing are those appropriate? And more importantly, how do we think about, at what is the break point at which, going outside to a private vendor is, not using tax dollars wisely? I think at that in and of itself is, again, it's not a simple analysis, but I think you could do a relatively light analysis to just say at some threshold,
Yeah.
there is a point where bringing it in-house makes sense. Now, that threshold is here right now, right, whatever that number is. But if you look at it regionally, the number is lower because, more municipalities are doing something collectively
Right,
under one
economy of scale,
contract.
Right. yeah.
Right. But that's not what Mount Lebanon alone has responsibility to figure out.
Right.
Our threshold is, at some level, it is cost prohibitive to go outside, and we should do it inside. How do I understand? I think from a commission perspective, again, this doesn't have to be, right, every fine detail, but at some level, how do we as a community understand that we're getting more value than what we're spending? I think is a fair way to at least frame from a starting point. And maybe that's just, how many trash trucks does it take? How much would they cost, right? What,
And the main costs.
to do all the administrative components of it, maintain,
Workman's comp.
right? Again, Andrew, what is an enterprise?
That's a big one.
What does it look like? Again, it's not a fine analysis, but
We can put that together. We did that on the back of a napkin type analysis back
Yeah.
8 years ago now.
Yeah.
And every hauler that collects it in-house laughed us out of the room, saying, good luck trying to get this off the ground. Cost prohibitive wise. So we can do this. I just, fair warning, that it's probably going to be a large number, and we can understand that better.
well, I guess for me, it would be, what's an annualized cost, right? Because again, if I buy
Right.
a trash truck, right, it's a 15-year asset, right? I can annualize those, all right, you know where I'm going. How do we understand that annualized cost, not the upfront capital cost? Because again, if I'm looking at a 5-year contract, or I'm looking at the next 20 years, how do I understand, the commitment that I'm making, either going to a private vendor or doing it in-house? Because at some point, right, that the cost of the vendor is higher than what we will pay annualized over that period of time.
Is it though? I mean.
Well, at some point,
Well, but if we end up having to internalize all the workman's comp stuff, for example, at some point, our costs are gonna be,
We have a lot of issues here because we have no space. That's the number one thing. We
Okay.
don't have the space.
okay,
Where do we
sure,
put 6 to 8 trash trucks?
trucks, exactly,
We,
sure.
we have to haul everything off-site a far distance and haul it back, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of issues that go into it. We can do that exercise, but I think we knew that, but to what end when that comes back as that's just
Sure.
not happening? So what's the next step with that? I don't think that necessarily, I think that was more the question here is we can deliver that
Yeah,
will be a slight, we can get that. But I think it's really what the direction they're looking for is what's the next step in their role?
I think,
Their board is the
Yeah.
board is asking, what's our role here? Fleet electrification, if you read the memo on that side, we're kind of done with that because Greg Wharton has taken that over and we had, some coordination there. The pension side, this was the other one, where are we at? So is this the big project you want us to work on? Well, what happens with that next step after those costs are analyzed?
see, I would think after those costs are analyzed, if it's really an issue of we don't have the space, what other municipalities make sense to go in with where somebody would have space, for example?
And I don't know if that's necessarily our board level
Yeah.
issue.
yeah, I think that's where I think trying to
Yeah.
scope this appropriately,
Yeah.
is important, right? Because this is really advising on core services that we're already offering. I think for me, it's, at least that initial analysis, I think we generally know what the answer is, but for argument's sake, that's a starting point to start the next conversation about what are we thinking about with the next 5-year contract. For me, that's helping us set that stage of what are we trying to think about? Where are our priorities in terms of putting municipal energy regarding long-term waste management solutions? So that, that's a step. For me, the other thing that, Ian and I are working on for mobility is, the right-of-way and work around the right-of-way, and how do we understand the costs of incremental change around the right-of-way and right-of-way management, right? It's our biggest single asset. It's really kind of a nebulous thing to say, we've got all these assets that we are trying to incrementally manage over time, and we see them as curbs and streets and sewers and trees, and they're all kind of, the thing for me is, how do we strategically understand that this is our single largest physical asset, and we invest heavy amounts of money over time? How do we optimize, thinking about infrastructure, that infrastructure investment? That's another big, hairy topic, right? And I wouldn't ask you, Andrew, to do it because you've got a day job. But if we have smart people who can be thinking about, these topics and can be provided, information, those are the types of things that, again, I think, as we try to think about how do we improve municipal operations and the SMART goals, how do we engage, a financial advisory board, which ultimately this is all an economic discussion, right? These are all services that we are providing for our residents at a cost. How do we understand the financial implications of the long-term investments that we're making, right? I think those are kind of worthy discussions, but framing them, I think, is definitely, Steve, your point,
Well,
a
the
bit of a
difference
challenge.
between the garbage and the rights of way is, as the garbage, we're really the middleman. I mean, really what we're doing is using our power to be able to get a large contract at a good price and passing it on to our residents. We're a middleman for that. We're not really providing the service, so to speak.
Right.
I think that's important to remember that difference for our citizens especially.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And again, I think it's not that we anticipate changing the model, but there is a break point that we want to say there's a more efficient way to make sure the residents are getting the best service available. And that might be doing it in-house, that might be regionalizing, that there are different strategies, but step one is, what would our cost be to do it in-house as a starting point?
And then how do you extend that formula regionally? Not that you have to do that, but that we have something that if you can talk to the region and say, start plugging in your things.
And that's where, look, I never thought I'd be feeling like a short timer this, but there's a certain point, somebody is gonna be on the board, after December 31st, and trying to create something. I think to Andrew's point about fleet efficiency, it was, okay, spend the time, build the spreadsheet. It's maintainable such down the road, we said the cost of fuel is this, or electricity is that, it's in
Plug in
between, but
numbers,
the structure was built. The idea of how to process, review the pension plans. People who've never done this before to say, oh, this is what we do, what it looks like, now I can provide the oversight. That was spending some time to create that structure. So if the next thing is trash, to say, at least starting to say, hey, we get a quote from somebody. It's blah, blah, we know it's gonna be this much, even if it's the back of the envelope analysis, if we did it in-house. So at least there's some, again, perspective to go, you think this cost is bad, you should see what it'd be for us to do it. So at least there's something real for the residents to say, I've got some perspective of what we commissioner buying. And if the next things beyond that become in some form of cost right away, or eventually we've got South Garage, these sorts of projects, and I think thinking about I'll call it the assignment, the task, how to do it in a manageable way to say, you have very active volunteers, what are we looking for? And I think that's what brought this into the questions, to say, what do we need, what questions are we tasked answering? And let's do the back of the envelope and then come back and say, what
Well, I
else
think-
y'all have?
Well, I think that to this board being new,
Yeah.
didn't have the mold of other boards, right? Parks and Rec had to, so on and so forth.
Yes.
Is unfortunately, to the detriment of this board, is we already do so much in the public realm financially. Typically, financial management boards are dealing with budgets. They're dealing with specific processes within the government structure that we already do. That we didn't need this board to be doing that because there was a lack of. So it's struggling because it doesn't know where to go.
Right, sure, makes sense.
And we've certainly spent many times, like last November, having them show up so they can understand how the pieces go together.
Right.
Because I'm hoping as we go forward and things come up, that they're more educated to say, oh, bond, I see what went into this bond, what are you talking about for the next bond? But, we've got a heck of a head start, which is good and bad at the same time. The board's like, so what else do you want us to do? So, Andrew, you feel like we at least have some
Yeah,
answers,
we're good for
some
right now.
questions answered,
Yep.
so thank
You
you.
good?
If you have any more, I can help you with kind of the background on the comp plan stuff too.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
guys.
Andrew, we come back to you for insurance renewal.
Yes, thank you, Commission. So I am the topic of not good news.
Yep.
So first of all, I want to first and foremost express my gratitude and thanks to Terry Winstein, my assistant. She shepherded this process since January, so what you have delivered here, although bad news, financially, she was the one who shepherded this program to get us here. So to rehash for the public, every 5 years, we request to the commission a stipend of some sort that is a expanded service level to hire an insurance consultant to market our coverages. So these are all non-employee based coverages, so your property and casualty, cyber liability, umbrella insurances, inland marine, so on and so forth. So all these insurances are then marketed by an insurance professional that reads through all of our policies, keeps us up to date to where we should be from a full independent viewpoint. So this viewpoint they have no skin in this game outside the fee we're paying them. They're getting us the best rate they can, so on and so forth. So when we started in January, we approached and we talked about all the markets that we would like to be in, people that have contacted us since our last 5-year review, firms that have called us and said, hey, we would like to be in part of the next one. So there were a couple new ones that we had this year, and so on and so forth. So in the interim, once we started this process, we did get notified by our current insurance, property and casualty insurance, that they were dropping us from coverage. We knew that was a bad sign. Why were they dropping us from coverage? It's the ice rink. 100% it's the ice rink. I will say it again, it was the ice rink. It was for 2 reasons. One is 2017, and one was
You see
2023.
Dave Tonelli covering his
Yes.
face.
Unfortunately, it's just, they didn't like the size of the claims, and they were gonna drop
We
us.
actually used our insurance, they run happy.
Yes, they did, and what really comes down to is we're either gonna pay now or pay later, right? These things aren't free to replace $1 million worth of equipment, and coverage for it. We had,
basically a loan.
exactly, they didn't, and mind you, when the ice froze, and the freezing and the heaving that happened in 17, it wasn't a huge number, but they saw some liability there and they didn't wanna, it's property damage, liability insurance, so on and so forth. Long story short, it was marketed. We did get some responses, but no, outside of our current broker, there was nobody that could give us a complete package.
Wow.
No one could give us a complete package. In so much, there was one insurance carrier that said, we don't want to insure Main Park. We'll insure everything else, but we will not insure Main Park.
Main part because it includes the ice
Because
rink.
it includes the ice rink, correct. But they weren't going to include anything that's at 900 Cedar Boulevard,
Nice.
which includes the tennis center, the pool, all the things, all those things. So we ran into a big headwind here due to it.
Sure.
And so the results are in the costs that you can see that really increase. So two things that we need to keep in mind. One is the property and casualty, this will take 5 to 7 years to cool off. So we're probably gonna be at this level for the next 5 to 7 years, because they're covering themselves, right? It's an aging facility, We haven't fully replaced the compressors. We did a fix the way we said we were going to. I think we replace in 3 to 5 years like we were talking about, probably closer to the 3 years for the compressors. I think that'll be a big feather in our cap, just go back and say, hey, these have been replaced and you're not having to expose yourself to that liability and all that stuff, so on and so forth. So it's going to take a while. I'm giving you a 5 to 7 year horizon before this is, I mean, mind you, we're talking about a 2017-ish incident. So it's gonna take a while for this to fall off.
Did they give any loss prevention ideas other than, like, melt the ice? No, we're not doing that.
Right.
I mean, did they give any seriously to say, these are things we can do, or just, here's the number?
No,
CMI?
here's some increases to your deductibles, yeah, so have fun.
CMI.
Yeah, CMI. So, there wasn't much there. And the second thing is, we'll see a little bit of a reduction next year, in some of the umbrella coverages we have. The way this was marketed with Travelers wanted to cover it, but we can do it with Greenwich next year, so we're hoping we can get back in there and save ourselves 20 to 30 grand in umbrella coverages. Just the way this shook out with the bid, the way the RFP was constructed, we're hoping that next year we can soften a little bit of the blow that will be next year. But overall, I do want to say that based on tonight's presentation, one of the things that they can't get us on when it comes to this is claims having to do with stormwater and sewage.
Right.
Things we have really seen
Right.
a dramatic decrease in are
Sure.
those claims.
Yeah.
So we have been doing a great job on that end. We just have run into a little bit of a headwind with this. But we're covered. We have adequate reserves to cover the deductibles or anything like that. It's not going to affect us.
Right.
We're adequately, and the insurance consultant, let me just back up a step, went through every line of coverage we had and made sure made adjustments where we needed to.
Good.
So some of the increase, very small and minimal, may have been to, hey, this needs to be tweaked because that's not right.
Right.
He's actually recommended next year we look at cyber liability and up our
Yeah.
coverage, another $1 million.
Yeah.
So that's for next year. We have a couple notes that, hey, next year when we go out to Travelers to say, hey, or Travelers doesn't do our cyber liability, but you get my point, that, hey, we need to go out, let's ask about this coverage and see where we're at to make sure that we're properly covered.
Sure.
So he did a great job, and it's the firm Emsco Long that did the coverage for us. Secondarily, the next update is we're then now looking at our workers' comp coverage. So what's coming to you next is potentially changes to our workers' comp coverage and how we do it. We may stay where we're at. We don't know that answer. So part of our marketing RFP to our coverages was also for workers' comp because that's never been looked at in 30 years.
Wow.
So we're going to look at it. We're displeased, I will say that on record, we are displeased with the way it's been handled. And it's time to at least look at it and say, it may be the right coverage. I don't know that answer, but we've never looked at it, so we're here to look at it. So
Yeah, if it's
that'll be next.
perfect, you should look at it every.
Yeah.
less than
Well, it's
5
gonna
years.
be, it's most likely gonna be starting to be part of the 5-year
Yes.
Yeah.
RFP,
Absolutely.
marketing
Yeah.
RFP,
Yeah,
you know.
that makes sense.
That was something that, kind of promulgated from some service that we were getting that we weren't too happy with. So we're gonna be, that'll be the next stage for this project.
And the folks that dropped this, I mean, this is a pool type of setup, and they really, like, they wanted the best of the best of the best, because they say, okay, then we're gonna kick out dividends and so forth. So, obviously, the losses were the losses. I think also just, by nature, they weren't as, be careful, because the solicitor's in the room and this is online. The idea is that I think they were maybe doing a little cherry picking, and we just didn't fit, kind of thing. And it is, it's their business model, and it works for them, it just didn't work for them and us. It happens.
I think the other way to look at the Brink claims is had those not been covered claims, the municipality would have paid those costs out
Out of our own
upfront,
pocket,
all
sure.
at once.
That's right.
Yeah.
So now they will be paid out essentially over
Yeah.
time.
It's $1.5 million
Yeah.
dollars back to us.
I think the biggest
that
problem with
we're
the
down.
insurance industry is the name of it. It doesn't really insure you on anything. All it does is give you a long-term loan to pay off whatever happened.
And I know this is Insurance Geek talking, but I'm really excited that workers' comp is gonna be reviewed
Oh.
next year. But no, seriously, it's like, we haven't looked at it in 30 years.
Yeah.
It's just right for some sort of savings out there.
And mind you, the
Because-
workers' comp program we're in, we're the #1 dividend recipient. So it's not like we haven't done our job on the safety committees we have
Sure.
and the investment we make in our employees, equipment, and safety here.
And if we have good loss
So-
history, which we do, that's marketable.
Yes.
So we're looking at that as well.
Excellent, excellent. I think we
So
are probably
tell
in
Terry
time, so
thanks.
thank you very much.
1 minute to spare.
1 minute to speak.
And we will re-adjourn in commission chambers
Yeah.
at 8.
All right, thank you.
Fabulous.